Good morning, my name is JC. I am the host of the South Florida Development Showcase. First of all, I hope that you and your families are great and you're safe and healthy. And I also like to thank you for logging on for this event and the past events that I've had the past couple of weeks for the South Florida Development Showcase online panel. Unfortunately, we couldn't have had the physical event this year at Jungle Island, but as promised with ISG World and Swire, we are bringing you the Miami Report 2020 Summer Edition. I'd like to thank Craig Studnicki, CEO of ISG World, Swire Properties, and Brickell City Center for allowing me to host the release of the most sought-after market report, ISG World Miami Report 2020. To open up today's presentation, I'd like to introduce Karen Bowers, President of Swire Properties.
JC, thank you very much for your warm introduction. First and foremost, a very warm welcome to our partners, the real estate broking community in Miami and beyond. It's a shame that you can't all be here with us, but hopefully you'll get the benefit of the incredible hard work Craig and his team have done in putting this Miami 2020 report together. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce you to Craig Studnicki. Craig has been partnering with Swire Properties for the last 2 years and helping us develop and sell and promote Brickell City Center units in Reach and Rise. I think it's wonderfully refreshing to have such a data-driven platform for us all to understand better the Miami real estate context. So thank you very much for all joining us, and Craig, over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Craig Studnicki, CEO of ISG and related ISG. I want to thank JC Casares. I want to thank Karen Bowers for joining me today, and particularly Swire Properties for allowing us to present the Miami Report 2020 at last to all of you this morning. It was probably early March. I think it was the first week of March. We had this thing finished, sending it to the printer, and I was going to join JC Casares and the developer South Florida Showcase at Parrot Jungle and present all of our findings to all of you. But we all know what happened. We got stuck with this virus and a pandemic, and we stopped the printing of the Miami Report because we knew that Corona, the pandemic, was going to influence our conclusions, and sure enough it has. So I'm glad we did. Finally, we've got it today to present to all of you. I will tell you that the silver lining, I suppose, that we always see in every problem that ever we encounter in life leads us into a certain direction, as has this pandemic, particularly when it comes to residential real estate. And those leading indicators is what I'm about to present to all of you today. So I'm very glad, in a way, that we didn't produce the Miami Report in March, because already it would have been obsolete. So with that said, let me begin. We're going to cover today the Q1 and Q2 of 2020, unprecedented times for sure, followed by Q3 and Q4, reasons for optimism for all of us here in South Florida. While we were in quarantine, we were all searching for answers, not just inside ISG and related ISG, but so were you. We asked Swire Properties if they would consider hiring Andres Oppenheimer, a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer for the Miami Herald and 60 other publications around the world, and an Emmy Award winner from CNN. He hosts a program called Oppenheimer Presenta in Espanol. He is probably the leading expert when it comes to political and economic affairs in all of Latin America, and particularly the United States. And Swire said, yeah, let's do it. And in early May, we had a webinar, hopefully many of you saw it, where Andres spoke about what is happening in South America, what is happening even here in Miami, as influenced by the International Monetary Fund. He had happened to interview the president of the IMF about a week before he conducted the webinar for Swire and for ISG. And I found it very insightful. It was now 2 months ago. Some of the conclusions that Andre shared with us that day are still very valid today, and we're going to recap those at the beginning of this presentation. For starters, he indicated that this recovery from this pandemic will recover faster than the Great Depression of 1929, or for that matter, even the banking crisis of 2008. Now, why did he bring this up? Maybe that's a lost conversation now here in the middle of July. But back in early May, a lot of people were comparing this current recession that we're still in to the Great Depression of 1929, as well as the banking crisis of 2008. This is how he distinguished what we're going through today versus those other economic downturns. First of all, 1929, the Great Depression, it took us 10 years, the United States and the world, 10 years to recover from the Great Depression of 1929. That's not going to happen in 2020. In 2008, the great banking failure, oh boy, those of us that were in the real estate business then, we know exactly how that felt. And it didn't feel like it was going to take 2 years to recover. It felt at the time it was going to be much longer. But in fact, it was only 2 years. 2020, he predicts this to be a 6-month recovery, beginning sometime in March, which takes us right till the end of August, pretty close to the middle of Q3 of this year. And why? For reasons I'm about to get to in the Miami Report presentation. There has been a global reaction to this virus that has been impressive. And I think you'll all agree that the United States has probably taken the biggest lead with economic stimulus to keep this country from slipping into a deeper recession than that which we're experiencing anyway. As a result of some of those incentives, this is what the IMF, as told to us by Andres Oppenheimer, is projecting for next year, both globally, the United States, China, which is very key to this rebound for next year, and how it will influence South America. The negative numbers are obvious. Some of these numbers seem a little heavy, might seem a little boring, but it's important because this kind of lays the foundation of why we can feel some optimism in both Q3 and Q4 of this year, let alone 2021. Globally, the world economy is contracting now by -3%. The US by close to 6%. China by close to 6%. These are serious numbers. And obviously it has a negative impact on our brothers and sisters south of the border in South America. But next year, in part because of the amazing stimulus that's been put in to keep us from contracting anymore from the United States, the global economy is expected to grow by close to 6% next year. The US by close to 5%, but look at China. This is key. China is expected to grow by close to 9% next year. This is a combination of the stimulus put in place by the US together with the stimulus put in place by China. If China's economy grows by 9%, the key point that Oppenheimer tried to make to all of us back in May is they are the largest consumer of exports from South America. So if that country is going to expand by 9%, South America has to rebound, because they're going to be absorbing all of the exports that come out of every country in Central and South America, helping South America to get back on its feet from this pandemic. And as a result, Mexico is expected to have positive GDP by 3%, Colombia by close to 4%, and Argentina by 4.5%. The seeds of this recovery have already been planted. And what Andres Oppenheimer was telling all of us in early May, you can expect to start to see some signals from this rebound in the third and particularly the fourth quarter of this year. Folks, welcome to the third quarter. This is July. This is the beginning of Q3 of 2020. Oppenheimer went further and even said that we've probably taken the biggest stomach punch already from the pandemic economically. Medically, different story. But economically, we've already gotten hit. Now, how does all of this affect you, me, real estate industry here in South Florida? Well, we're going to attempt to explain this to you with our feature story. Our feature story is kind of a follow-up to last year's Miami report. We called last year's Miami report supply shock, because based on what we were not seeing in the form of new construction with new condominiums to meet demand here in South Florida, we were advertising to all of you and to ourselves, and whether it takes a year or two, we're going to hit a wall with supply. We're running out of supply, even though the media likes to talk about there's all this overabundance of supply, there's an overhang of supply, prices are going to be coming down. It just wasn't true. So we called it supply shock, and we said it would take another year or two. This year, as I just indicated, we're kind of doing a follow-up of that exact theme, but presented a little bit differently. What we did this year is we looked at South Florida from a 35-year window. And South Florida, as we define it, is Coconut Grove to the south, Fort Lauderdale to the north, and everything east of 95. Yes, it includes the beaches, South Beach, Miami Beach, Sunny Isles Beach, Hollywood Beach, Fort Lauderdale Beach, everything east of 95. And we studied 515 buildings, over 100,000 condos, but this time we studied it based on deliveries, not groundbreakings as we've done in the past, deliveries. Let me show you. Whoa, this is some chart, huh? It starts all the way back in 1990 and comes straight through to the year 2025. When you look at 1990 through the year 2000, you see more or less an average of about 10 buildings delivered every year, on average. Somewhere between 1,600 to 2,000 units. Yes, it gyrates. Yes, it goes up and down. But the range is tolerable and understandable. That was what we called the 90s. It was a nice steady time. South Americans were buying, second home buyers from the Northeast were buying, the Florida population was growing steadily. It was a nice and comfortable time. And then we hit the 2000s, 2001, 2002, 2003, and oh my God, when you look down at the bottom of the chart, 41 buildings get delivered in 2003, followed by 44 buildings, followed by 31, followed by in 2007, 52 condominium buildings get delivered from Coconut Grove to Fort Lauderdale, east of 95, creating this explosion of inventory. That was the cycle of the first decade of this century, the 2000s. Look at that mountain of inventory. How in God's name did that happen? We'll explain it, because we believe that what happened, the seeds that created this mountain of inventory have been planted again, and bodes well for the immediate future of future development here in South Florida. But this overbuilding, and it was, this sum total is around 35,000 condos that got developed between Coconut Grove and Fort Lauderdale in a 10-year period. But it helped to create 2008. This didn't just happen in Miami, by the way. This happened all over the United States, along with a lot of other businesses that went, I would say, overexpanded a little bit too quickly. So look what happened as a result of 2008, not much. 44 buildings in 2005 and 2007, followed by 5, 2, and 4. These were buildings that had already broken ground in the previous decade and were just now getting completed. Now, this was the banking crisis of 2008. And when the 2008 banking crisis got resolved, we had another cycle. This time 20,000 condos compared to 35,000. A smaller cycle, a smaller mountain, if you will, of supply. And how did that happen? We'll explain why. Leading us right now to 2020. Whew, what a year this has been. And what has been put in place that gives us any confidence that there is going to be another building cycle coming to South Florida? Well, please be a little patient with me. I'm going to explain every one of these cycles to you the way we see it. And I think by the time I finish, I think you'll see it the same way. In 2011, in 2001, we had 9/11. The worst terrorist attack ever in the history of the United States, and actually the second time in the history of the U.S. that the U.S. was attacked, second time since Pearl Harbor. We were, in short, freaked out. No one ever attacked the United States, let alone the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. We were frozen for 2 or 3 months, frozen. I remember I didn't go out to restaurants very much. I certainly didn't go to shopping malls. We didn't do a lot. Then the Fed chairman of the United States, Alan Greenspan, realized that he needed to create some kind of a motivation to keep businesses going, to keep us, the United States, from slipping into a psychological recession. So what he did was he lowered interest rates. The Fed fund rate was close to 6%. He lowered it to 1.3. He didn't add any liquidity to the banks. He didn't need to. The banks were flushed with cash. By lowering rates, now the banks had a lot of cash and low interest rates. And what did they do? They lent them to businesses, small businesses, big businesses, real estate developers here in South Florida. And as a result of this stimulus that was put in place right here in 2002, this cycle began. This cycle was very different from the cycle that we've just come out of from an underwriting standpoint. What does that mean? This was sell the condos with 20% down, give the buyers the right to assign their contracts. The street version of that is we let people flip their contracts even before closing. Buyer A would sell their apartment to buyer B. A lot of speculation as a result of the underwriting guidelines combined with all of the liquidity, combined with super low interest rates. It all helped to contribute to 2008, the great banking failure. But it is most developers' contention and belief, as well as mine, that this cycle absolutely was helped by the stimulus put in place after September 11th, which simply included lower interest rates. How do we get out of the banking failure then of 2008? This was a problem. This was all banks, investment houses in New York, General Motors, Ford, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. The whole country was failing, not just real estate. Everything was failing. Well, we needed to do two things, according to the brains in Washington, D.C. We have to lower rates again. This time they climbed to 4.1%, down to 0.09. First time the overnight Fed rate went below 1. But we have to do more than that. We have to provide some cash for the banks, for Goldman Sachs, for Bank of America, for AIG, for General Motors and Ford, for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And it was called the TARP funds, Toxic Asset Relief Program. Those of you that are new to real estate, you may not be familiar with just how controversial this was. In the House of Representatives and the Senate, there was all kinds of argument over this. Let them fail. Lehman Brothers, in fact, did fail. A lot of people in Washington said if those companies were so badly mismanaged, let them fail. We'll replace them with new banks. We'll replace them with new institutions. We'll replace them with new car manufacturers. But then there were other minds inside Washington that said, I don't know. If you're wrong, we're going to slip into a depression. If the United States slips into a depression, so will the rest of the world. So those more sober minds, in hindsight, won. And they created TARP funds equaling $475 billion. So now the banks had low interest rates and fresh liquidity from you, from me, from the taxpayers. By the way, it actually turned out to be a very good investment on behalf of the United States. They got all this money back plus interest. The beautiful thing was they kept us from slipping into a depression and shortened the recession. Oppenheimer called this 2 years. He was right. It was 2 years. And as a result of this stimulus put in place here, once we worked our way out of the excess overhang of supply, which only took 2 years, 2009 through 2010, 2010 through 2011, in 2 years it was all gone. And developers, Swire Properties, Related, PMG, they all started the next cycle in 2012. And it created this cycle of new inventory. Not as big as this. And why? Underwriting changed. 20% down, I'll let you sign your contract and I'll see you closing. This is 50% down, no right of assignability, and I'll see you at closing. So what they basically did, they being real estate developers and the construction lenders, they took all the speculation out. These were true, mostly end users. So we didn't build as much inventory in this cycle as we did here. Once again, this is 35,000 units. This is 20,000. But in part, it was created because of the stimulus that the US government put in place in 2008 to keep us from slipping into a depression. Now we come to here. Why haven't developers continued to build? Prior to 2020, the economy's been good. Dow Jones Industrials is doing great. Nasdaq is doing great. Unemployment's incredibly low. Why aren't we developing more condos? Well, we're not building 20-story buildings anymore. We're building 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-story condominiums, and we're stacking them with hundreds and hundreds of units. It takes time. From the time a pre-sale program begins until the time a developer can finish construction of these super tall towers. The average lifespan is close to 5 years, from the beginning to the end, from the beginning of a pre-sale to the time the building is finished. It is very hard to sell to an American a condominium and tell him he's got to wait 5 years. I know, I'm from New Jersey. It's too long. We just don't like to wait that long. But Latin Americans, they love this. First of all, they like pre-construction. They feel like they're getting in on the ground floor, and they are. But you give them 4, 5, 6 years, they can move their money slowly, they can plan their lives, plan the entire move from South America to eventually Miami. Are all of them coming to Miami? No, but at least it even gives them a chance to plan having a second home here in Miami. It gives them the time that they need. So pre-construction condominiums, a perfect recipe for that Latin market. But we don't have the Latin market because the US dollar in 2016 got very strong all over the world. And it kept going up in 17, it kept going up in 18. I actually thought last year in 19, maybe it would start to relax. Maybe the US dollar would devalue a little bit. Maybe the economies in South America would start gaining strength, and because their economies were gaining strength, they would naturally gain strength against the US dollar, and developers would start pre-construction again. But that didn't happen. The dollar remained strong. Developers here in Miami know they can't reach that pre-sale requirement of 50% of the total units which is imposed on them by construction lenders without that Latin market. So consequently, they haven't started anything. Really haven't started anything. What we're looking at here are deliveries of buildings that are already under construction. This year, there's about 5 buildings that are going to get delivered. Next year, 8. And then 1, 1, 1, 2, and then 0 by 2025. 0. This is what we meant by supply shock. But something's happened this year which has changed everything. This coronavirus created this pandemic, a virus that the best brains in Washington can't quite figure out how to keep us from slipping into a deeper recession than we're already in. So, more stimulus, more lower interest rates. Let me show you what's happened. As a result of COVID-19, now Chairman Powell of the Fed has lowered the US overnight rate from 2.4 to 0.05. Folks, this is an all-time low for interest rates in the United States. I told you in 2008, they provided $475 billion in TARP funds that was met with all kinds of debate. This time it's $7 trillion. And no one has said a word. No one said a peep. And it's likely that that number is going to grow to 10 trillion. The US government has never infused the business economy with so much cash in such a short period of time. So now what we have is a combination of the lowest interest rates we've ever seen and more cash floating in the financial system than we can even measure. Nasdaq this week hit an all-time high, even with unemployment at close to 11%. S&P has approached an all-time high a couple of weeks ago. The Dow Jones Industrials, it's likely that by the end of July or August, they hit their apogee that they experienced back in January of 29,000. Still with high unemployment. Still, we're in the grips of a recession because we're still in this pandemic. And why? Because this $7 trillion is looking for a home. But once Wall Street gets exhausted, once they start to hit all-time highs, some of this money is going to be looking at real estate. Some of it's looking at real estate already. There's 3 types of real estate, as we all know. There's industrial, there's commercial, there's residential. Industrial, it just keeps trucking along. It's fine. Commercial is mostly retail, hotels, and office buildings. And I think we'll all agree, at the moment, they're kind of in the troubled asset basket. Because we don't know how much, when we're finished with this pandemic, are people going to really reevaluate their office needs? Is the business traveler market for the hotel ever going to come back to what it was pre-COVID? What about retail? There's all kinds of questions attached to commercial, but residential, no. If you're in an area where the population is increasing and you're approaching tight supply, some of that money may be looking to park inside residential real estate because the prospects for that could be enormous. So we're looking at $7 trillion, 14 times more money than was invested in 2008, coupled with lower interest rates. So yeah, this is the stimulus that was created now. What we're telling you, which seems to make nothing but common sense, there's another cycle coming. When? I don't know. How big? I don't know. Is it coming? Oh yeah. Partly because we're running out of supply. We said it last year and it's becoming even more true than ever because in fact people keep coming to South Florida. Notwithstanding the shutdown, despite even the pandemic, people are coming to South Florida. Now we're going to go through a microanalysis of Brickell. I'm presenting this today from Brickell City Center. Brickell has become unquestionably the most popular neighborhood in all of South Florida. Here's a micro picture of the macro that I just showed you. So you can see Brickell Avenue from 1990 all the way through 2025. And some modest amount of buildings got delivered, anywhere from probably an average of about 5 buildings per year in the 90s. During the post 9/11, you had 5 to 6 buildings on average. During this last decade, 2 to 3 buildings per year were delivered in Brickell Avenue. Not bad. Brickell could easily handle that, and Brickell is a very popular neighborhood. But now here we are in the year 2020. Look at this. We have 0 new buildings being delivered this year, 0 next year, 0 in 2022. We have 1 building projected to be delivered in the year 2023. It's called Una. It's under construction. It's on the bay. Spectacular building. 135 units in 2023. It's 3.5 years from now. 0 in 2024. 0 in 2025. I think you're getting the picture. Developers stopped building pre-construction even in Brickell because we didn't have the Latin market because the dollar was so strong. But that's now catching up with us. We're running out of supply here in Brickell. And how impactful is that on Brickell? We did a quick study to look at how condos were selling throughout all of South Florida in the last 12 months, going back from July 1 of 19 right through June of this year. We looked at Brickell, downtown, the beaches, Aventura, Sunny Isles, Coconut Grove, Key Biscayne, and all of East Fort Lauderdale, all of it. 1 out of every 3 sales took place in Brickell. This has become, by the numbers, not my opinion, not anyone's opinion, by the MLS numbers, the most popular neighborhood in all of downtown Miami, and all of Miami for that matter. I actually think Brickell City Center probably had a lot to do with that. They created the engine to make this truly a work and live environment. You don't even need a car if you own a condominium at Brickell City Center. You can walk everywhere. Most people consider it a little bit of a little mini Manhattan when they're living here. And for those that like that vibe with this beautiful weather that Miami offers us, it's a perfect combination, and I think it's revealed in these numbers. It's very, very popular, followed by the downtown core. But Brickell is it. And when you look at that compared to what's being delivered, we have supply shock in Brickell big time. Now we're into the new construction summary. This is something that we've been presenting since 2009. 2009 was our very first Miami report. This is number 11. You know, it's still amazing to me how many people still think there's this huge overhang of developer inventory in South Florida. I shared with you earlier, from the year 2000 to the year 2008, 35,000 condos got developed here in the South Florida area, from Coconut Grove to Fort Lauderdale. And yeah, that was a bit too many. I agree. In this past cycle, it was 20,000. And I'll show you what it looks like. Just under 20, 19,320. And as of today, July 22nd, 17,700 are sold. Sold, most of which are even occupied, leaving 1,600 available for sale. Out of the 1,600, 1,000 of them are standing inventory. 609 are either in pre-construction or under construction. Just 609. Take the 1,004, and now take those units and divide it neighborhood by neighborhood, from Coconut Grove to the south, Fort Lauderdale to the north, and include the beaches. And what you're going to discover, as we have, it's not very much inventory at all, neighborhood by neighborhood or submarket by submarket. This is what we kind of mean by supply shock from the developer perspective. Here in Brickell Avenue, as an example, there's approximately 125 condominiums remaining at Brickell City Center. There's roughly 30 at Flatiron down the street. That's under 160 brand new condos, developer units in all of Brickell, in the most popular neighborhood of Miami. I think you've got the point. That's a year of inventory maximum. So what's going to happen? This inventory, the best buys right now are with these condos, and I'll explain why in a second. Not so much here. These developers know what they have. They've got big, beautiful units. There's projects like Una here in Brickell Avenue, Missoni in Edgewater, the estates at Aquilina in Sunny Isles Beach, Turnberry Ocean Club in Sunny Isles Beach. These are just spectacular buildings that are under construction. The developers know what they have, and they're not giving that stuff away. The best buys might be from the developers with standing inventory, and I'll explain why in a second. Let's look at MLS. So we just talked about developer inventory. We know that developer inventory is getting tight. We know that developers know that it's getting tight and that they're looking for a way to start pre-construction. I thought last year, when we presented the Miami report to all of you, that we would see evidence of pre-construction this year. And I think we were on our way, but COVID showed up. This pandemic showed up and stopped everything, basically delayed everything for a full year. Hopefully we'll see evidence of it next year. Will you see the dollar devalue a little bit against these foreign currencies? You know, you just might. I'm not a Wall Street guy. I watch CNBC most mornings. I kind of got used to it when we were on lockdown. Lately, there's a talking head there that shows up around 7 o'clock in the morning that follows gold. And I'm just sharing this with you for what it's worth. In 2010, the price of gold went way up in reaction to a devalued dollar. And that all happened as a result of the nervous tissue, I guess, that was in the whole world about the US dollar because of what happened in 08. But the dollar went up, the dollar went down, and gold went up. The gold price is going up again today in anticipation that the US dollar will weaken around the world. And why will the dollar weaken? Because that $7 trillion that was put into the system, that's what Wall Streeters call quantitative easing, which is a fancy expression for saying they've printed a lot of money. And by printing all that money, you're going to cause a weakening of the dollar. Not significantly, but maybe enough to shake up that South American Latin market that real estate developers in Miami really need, because the construction lenders won't close on a construction loan until 50% of those units are pre-sold. And the natural market for pre-construction, as we talked about earlier, is the Latin market. So perhaps there's a new set of circumstances brought to us as a result of this pandemic that are going to bring back the pre-construction market to Miami, which I believe we're going to need just to satisfy demand. If developer inventory continues to get absorbed, albeit slowly, but nevertheless it's continuing to get absorbed, the only place they can look is MLS for shelter. That's it. So how is that behaving? Start with the rule of thumb of real estate. When you have more than 10% of any building, any single family home community on the market, you have a buyer's market, more than 10%. Less than 10% is a seller's market. It's that simple. That's the rule of thumb. Single family homes. We've been measuring this in Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale, Broward, and the Palm Beaches. How have single family homes been selling? And is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? This is an example of why I'm glad we waited for the Miami report to get published until now. Because this pandemic has caused a significant change in the buying preferences of residential buyers in South Florida. Since January of this year through June, what do you hear this? 4 out of every 5 real estate transactions, residential transactions, have been houses, single family homes. Yes, 80%, 4 out of 5, which has completely tipped the scales with single family homes and turned it into a seller's market. We've measured the amount of houses that are on the market in MLS in Dade County, Broward County, and Palm Beach. In every single case, you're under 1%, not under 10%. You're absolutely in a seller's market. If you have a client that was looking to buy a house as an investment, that was last year's opportunity. You've missed it. Time went by, pandemic happened, and people want houses. And why do they want houses? Common sense, together with interviews from some of these buyers, 2 words: social distancing. It's easy to manage in a house. If you have a swimming pool, you have amenities. And then it's not so funny anymore, because if we ever do get subjected to another quarantine, houses are going to become the most popular residential asset you can have in South Florida, particularly with our wonderful climate. The buyers are leading us in this direction. Furthermore, we've been studying the MLS, and what we've been seeing is that the houses are selling between 95 to 100% of list price. Yeah, it's a seller's market. The sellers are getting their numbers. I suspect, by the way, that that ratio is going to maintain itself, 95 to 100%. But what's probably going to happen, and it's happening a little bit already, is the list price of those houses are starting to pop. And they're going to pop even more, tipping some of the buyer interest to condominiums. Condominiums with strict rental policies. What does that mean? You know, most residential condominiums only allow the owners of the condominiums to rent once a year, maybe twice a year, 6-month minimums. Those are the condos that will be in most favor by the buyers of 2020. Now that we're watching, and even the buyers are seeing the activity happening with single-family homes, fueled, by the way, by very, very low mortgage rates, which we'll touch on in a second. But this by itself should tell you, because it certainly told us, houses, single-family homes in South Florida, say it loud, say it proud, it's now a seller's advantage. There's just not that much supply. Here's a trend study to prove the point. 2 years ago, in July of 18, there were 19,000 single-family homes on the market at that point in time. Following year, 16,000, almost 17,000, dropped by a couple thousand. Look what's happened now. You're down to 13,000. Now look at this. In the South Florida area, Palm Beach, Broward County, Dade County, we sell close to 47,000 houses a year. 12,900 are for sale. 47,000 get sold a year. This is 4 to 5 months supply. Not much. You're in the middle of July. In a couple of months, the thermometer up north is going to drop. More and more people from the Northeast are going to come down. They're going to look at this inventory. And let me tell you something about the Northeast. They always see Florida as the place where you get a big bang for your buck. You get a lot of house for your dollar in Florida. And for a Northeasterner, that's still true. So even though the price of houses are rising here as we speak, it's not going to intimidate somebody from the Northeast looking to buy houses. And they're coming. Even though it's the middle of summer, every one of you are probably dealing with somebody from New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. Everybody is. They're all planning for this coming winter. And I think we all know why. Condos. This is where we go next. Condos is where the buying opportunity is, because here we're saying this is a buyer's market. Remember the rule of thumb. If you're over 10% of inventory, the buyer has the advantage. If you're under 10%, the seller has the advantage. So that we've already talked about single-family houses, but condos, that's where the advantage is. The blended average right now of condos on the market is 13.6%. We studied resales in the condos that were built in this past cycle. And why? Because that's what all the buyers are looking at. They're looking at these beautiful brand new buildings designed by these famous architects around the world with these wonderful floor plans, great kitchens, great bathrooms, and amenities to die for. They're just spectacular, between the spas, the swimming pools, the gyms, they're perfect. That's what we studied. And what we looked at from 2 years ago in July of 18, there were close to 17.5% of all of those condos were in MLS. That was definitely a buyer's market. Followed by the following year, 15.8. It dropped by a couple of percentage points. Followed by this year, you're at 13.6. Dropped by a couple of percentage points. If the next 12 months, hopefully not interrupted with the stomach punch that we received in March and April with shutdown and quarantine, if the next 12 months just matches the last 12, this drops to 11. In Brickell, it'll drop to 10. In a year, Brickell will start, because Brickell went from 16 to 14 to 12. You're seeing the point. The point is simple. Developer inventory is shrinking. So the only place people can shop for shelter, particularly for condos, is MLS. Developers aren't replacing the condos because they can't, because of the high dollar and how it affects the Latin American buying demand. So where are people shopping for condos? In MLS. These numbers are telling us that MLS inventory is dropping. With houses, they're dropping drastically. With condos, not as fast. But I suspect 12 to 18 months from now, this will absolutely turn into a seller's market. Fueled by low mortgage rates, the time for your clients to make a great buy on residential real estate are condos in South Florida. My personal opinion, you've got a year, maybe 18 months to make the buy of a lifetime. This is what I meant by being fueled by low interest rates. The Fed fund rate is 0.05. You know, if you assume a 1 or 2% inflation rate in the United States, even though we're in this pandemic, that basically means we're in almost negative interest rate territory, practically speaking. 2.85 is the new low for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage for someone with great credit. I get it. The point I'm trying to make to you is we've never had these kind of low interest rates in the history of the United States. So you've got movement of people coming to Florida, particularly a lot of American. Domestic demand now has superseded the demand from Latin America. And Americans buy with mortgages. We're kind of built that way. We finance everything. But now we're getting really, really inexpensive money, which gives you even more buying power for that bigger house, for that bigger condo that they're actually buying. Now we get to the fun stuff, the population demand. Where are these buyers coming from? Let me show you. By that, I think I did this a little bit last year, but we're going to do it again because I think it's worth repeating, this time with some new, fresh information. To do this, we go back 20 years. Look at 1999. California was the fastest growing state in the country. It was growing by over 1,200 people a day, followed by Texas growing by over 900 a day, followed by Florida. 20 years ago, growing by over 500 people a day. Now, in this year, these are stats from the U.S. Census Bureau. These are people that declared these states their permanent home. So when in Florida, 20 years ago, when we said it was growing by 556 people a day, these are people that were calling Florida their permanent home. Second homes are not included. So if it's a second home buyer from Buenos Aires or Sao Paulo, if it's a second home buyer from New York City or Boston, Massachusetts, not included. These are permanent home buyers. We were number 3 20 years ago. Arizona was number 5 at 304 people a day. I mention that because Arizona's turned out to be kind of a steady Eddie. California, not so much. 20 years later, last year, 2019, California practically disappeared. Texas became number 1 at close to 1,100 people a day, followed by Florida, us, 950 a day, followed by Arizona at 330 people a day. That's about what they were growing at 20 years ago. Here's one of the key points, though. 20 years ago, most demographers in the U.S. Census Bureau were referring to California, Texas, and Florida as the big 3, the fastest growing states in the country. They don't anymore. Now it's the big 2, Texas and Florida and Texas. We're dominating it. These red circles show where the population losses that occurred last year. The big white circles indicate where the population gains are happening. There were 5 states last year that lost population, 5 out of 50, 5. They were Illinois, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. All lost population every single day. According to this, Connecticut lost 20 people a day, Massachusetts 26, New Jersey 72, Illinois, the cradle of Chicago, 189 people a day, and the big one, New York, minus 242 people a day. This is 2019, folks. This is way before we knew anything about a coronavirus. These were people that, in part, were reacting to the Tax Reform Act of 2017. It's expensive to live up there. The Tax Reform Act made it very expensive. Florida, Texas, no state income tax. Florida, unlike Texas, lots of ocean, lots of sunshine, tropical weather. People are coming here. People are coming here. And I needed to prove it. Because it wasn't just, I kind of had a feeling that New York and New Jersey folks were moving here. But what about Connecticut? What about Massachusetts? What about Illinois? If all of these people that are leaving their states, I asked inside ISG, where the hell are they going? Well, it turns out Bloomberg's ahead of us on that. Bloomberg studied the tax returns of the people that were leaving those states. And look what they found. That whether they left New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, or Massachusetts, the first state that they chose was Florida. Yeah. So many of you are dealing with buyers, potential buyers from all those states. Now you kind of know why. I'm originally from New Jersey. I still have a lot of family up there. I still believe that COVID, is acting kind of as an accelerator. It's not the main reason people are leaving there. The main reason is Tax Reform Act 2017. COVID is the accelerator. If I was planning on leaving New York or New Jersey as an example, anyway, I'm gonna do it a little sooner than later because of Corona, and because, quite frankly, of the threat that there could be a second wave this coming winter. And if I'm gonna be quarantined, I'm gonna be in Miami or Fort Lauderdale or Palm Beach, where the ocean temperature is so nice and the weather is always pretty, and I can walk outside, not be stuck inside in some cold, clammy weather. And that is going on as we speak. And that's in part why you see this movement. Here is we've been talking about the population of Florida for the longest time with our Miami report. And I keep telling all of you we're the second fastest growing state in the country. Maybe a few years ago, we were the third fastest growing state in the country. But this is not something that just happened in the last few years. This has been going on for quite some time. We found this in the internet, a quick 100-year study of population in the United States. We went all the way back to 1950, when the most populated state in the US was New York. Just follow this. Number 2 was Pennsylvania. Some of you maybe have never even heard of Pennsylvania, but number 2 was Pennsylvania, followed by Illinois, followed by Ohio. Look at some of these states. Massachusetts and Michigan were in here. California was way over here. Florida in 1950 was the 11th most populated state in the United States. What the US Census Bureau did is they studied the changing population of all of these states from 1950 over the last 70 years through, well, actually the last 60 years through, no, the last 70 years, excuse me, through 2020. I'm not so good at my math today. And then they projected it out another 30 years to 2050. Folks, watch what happens with Florida, the yellow bar on the bottom. Watch what happens to Pennsylvania. Watch what happens to Illinois. Watch what happens with California and with Texas. It almost speaks for itself. Go west, young man, to California. People took that very seriously in the last century. California passed New York right at the turn of this century. But look at Florida. Don't take your eye off of Florida. We've said goodbye to New Jersey. We said goodbye to Michigan. We said goodbye to Ohio, and then Illinois, and then Pennsylvania. And then we were chasing Texas and New York. And we got to be right around the year 2010, and New York was hearing our footsteps. And right around 2011, goodbye, New York. And so it goes. This is 2020 now. California, Texas, and Florida. And at the rate of population growth throughout all of these states, the US Census is saying this is what more than likely it will all look by the end of 2050. Florida having a population of nearly 30 million. Today you're under 22. For those of us that have a real estate license here in South Florida, remember that half of the daily population that Florida receives, half of it comes to South Florida, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami. Gets a little crowded. I understand what 95 is like. I drive from Sunny Isles Beach to Brickell Avenue almost every day. I know what it's like. It's not going to get much better because people keep coming here. And these are people, once again, that call Florida their home. Now, it's the big 3 in terms of total population, but it's the big 2 in terms of daily population growth for the last 2-3 years, and more than likely for the next 5 to 10. People are leaving California because it's very expensive to live there. The Tax Reform Act of 2017 we talked about how expensive it became for Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey. Out west, California became a very expensive place to live. So people are leaving. Not that many people are moving in. And that's why the population of California went from number 1 every single day to number 11 in 2019. That's what it looks like. This is not some new trend that's happened in the last 5 or even 10 years since IHG's been producing our Miami report. This has been going on for quite some time. Now, how has it affected the buying profile of what we do for a living? Well, look at this. 10 years ago, close to half of all residential sales that took place here in South Florida were from Latin America. 25% from the US, 30% we call other. Combination of Canada, Europe, and Asian sales. That was 10 years ago. This past 12 months, here's how it's reshaped. The US has more than doubled in the last 10 years. Domestic sales here in South Florida. South America has shrunk to 10%. Well, we talked about that. That's only because of the high dollar. Our Latin American friends love Miami. This is plan B for all Latin American families. They want to be here. If quantitative easing, the printing of all those dollars, the $7 trillion that went into the system, is causing gold to go up and may influence a weaker dollar, expect that to expand. That's for sure. South America loves Miami. And by the way, if you're checking these currencies, if you look at the Colombian and Mexican peso, they're kind of right where they were in February, pre-pandemic. They've strengthened nicely against the dollar. Colombia is on shutdown through August. The Mexican flight restrictions end on August 1. Be prepared. I suspect we're going to see a lot of our Mexican and Colombian friends coming to Miami to buy real estate because they are, I think most of the world is kind of impressed with the way we have responded to this pandemic economically. And I think they want to be a part of it. What they're not going to find, perhaps, is the amount of supply that they think is out there, as we just walked you all through. But what they will find is a beautiful home here in South Florida with the most ridiculous, wonderful climate, perhaps in the world. So these are the takeaways of our Miami 2020 report. Number one, a projected rapid economic recovery, as taught to us by Andres Oppenheimer, mostly as a result of his interview with the president of the International Monetary Fund. What he projected to us in May is holding true so far. And God willing, it does hold true. That means that the recession life cycle this year is 6 months, not the 2 years that we had to suffer in 2000 and 2008. Declining developer and MLS inventory. There's 1,600 developer units left out of the 20,000 that were developed in this past cycle. That's it. And of that, you have about 1,000 units of standing inventory, which means buyers that are moving here are shopping MLS and they're watching that inventory decline. An unprecedented lack of future development supply. I've been living here 30 years. I never thought I would see this, where there are 0 cranes in the sky of new condominiums, virtually 0, because developers can't get out of the ground, because at the moment we don't have that Latin buyer. All-time low mortgage rates. We're dealing with the lowest interest rates, whether it's the federal fund rate or whether it's mortgage rates in the history of the United States. And every Wall Street guy I talk to tells me you can expect these low mortgage rates for several years. Remember, Americans buy with mortgage financing. This is fuel in the tank. This is going to encourage even more buying. Continued population growth and demand. Oh, they're coming here. I just showed you from the Northeast. I showed you a 70-year history of Florida. People keep coming here. When the dollar weakens a little, and the Latin Americans return, expect this number to skyrocket. Are we ever going to grow as fast as Texas? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Texas and Florida, however, are projected to stay the fastest 2 growing states in the U.S. for at least the next 5 to 10 years. It's been a really tough year for everybody in the United States, including all of us here in South Florida. There's been more questions than there have been answers. I hope that our Miami 2020 report gave you some insight as to what's really happening in the form of supply, despite what people are talking about, and despite even sometimes what you may read in various publications. But at the end of the day, I think we all need to be a little bit grateful and appreciate where we get to live. This is Brickell Avenue. This is Miami 2020. We're truly blessed to be able to work and to live in this beautiful city. Anyway, on behalf of all my colleagues at ISG and related ISG, I appreciate your time today. I hope you find this information helpful. And I'll be seeing you here at Brickell City Center. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.